In 1987, the television landscape was forever changed when A Different World premiered, stepping out from the shadow of The Cosby Show to create a cultural phenomenon of its own. It was more than just a sitcom. It was a vibrant, pulsing heartbeat of black excellence, introducing millions to the life, love, and learning found within the walls of historically black colleges and universities. For 6 seasons, Hillman College became a second home for a generation, a place where characters grappled with apartheid, domestic violence, and the complexities of young adulthood, all while delivering laughter and style that defined an era. The show was a commercial and artistic triumph, etching itself into the collective memory as a beacon of possibility and pride. However, when the director yelled cut and the studio lights dimmed, the actors who brought these iconic characters to life stepped back into a reality far more complex and often more unforgiving than the scripted world of Hillman. Decades have passed since the final bell rang at Hillman, and time has carved deep, unique, and often sorrowful paths into the lives of the cast. While some found ways to reinvent themselves, others walked roads paved with silent struggle and heartbreak. Today, we pull back the curtain to honor the journeys of the departed stars who formed the very soul of A Different World. Mary Alice Smith as Letty Bostick. In the bustling world of Hillman College, few figures commanded as much respect and affection as Letitia Letty Bostick, portrayed by Mary Alice Smith. Letty was the quintessential dorm director, strict, no-nonsense, yet possessing a heart of gold that beat fiercely for her students. With her knowing gaze, and a voice that could switch from stern admonishment to maternal comfort in a heartbeat, Mary Alice created a character that felt like the grandmother or aunt every viewer wished they had. At the age of 51, she brought a grounded wisdom to the screen that anchored the show's youthful energy off-screen. Mary Alice was a titan of the stage and screen, a woman whose talent knew no bounds. From her Tony Award-winning work on Broadway to her unforgettable role as the Oracle in The Matrix Revolutions, she was a force of quiet dignity, yet behind the accolades and the characters who nurtured everyone else. Mary Alice's own life was marked by a profound solitude. She never married and had no children, dedicating her entire existence to her craft. Colleagues often spoke of her as a monk of the arts, someone who gave everything to the world but kept nothing for herself. Despite her immense talent, Hollywood often relegated her to supporting roles, never fully granting her the stardom she deserved. As she entered her twilight years, the woman who had memorized countless scripts began to lose her most precious asset. Her memory, retired and living. Away from the spotlight, she battled dementia, a cruel thief that slowly stole her recollections of her triumphs, her friends, and eventually her own identity. It was a silent struggle fought in the shadows of a career that had shone so brightly. Then the journey of this quiet legend came to a heartbreaking close. On July 27, 2022, Mary Alice passed away at the age of 85. She was buried as such. She lived peacefully and without fanfare. In a revelation that shocked and saddened the world, it was discovered that her estate was valued at a mere $500. It was a devastatingly modest sum for a woman who had bequeathed such a rich artistic legacy to the world, proving that sometimes those who give the most are left with the least. Diahann Carroll as Marion Gilbert. When Diahann Carroll swept onto the screen as Marion Gilbert, the sophisticated and demanding mother of Whitley Gilbert, she didn't just enter a scene, she owned it. At 54, Carroll embodied perfection, playing a woman of high standards and sharp wit. Marion was the mirror image of her daughter's aspirations, but she also represented the immense pressure of maintaining a flawless facade. This role was a case of art imitating life for Diahann Carroll was a woman who spent her entire career breaking barriers while striving for an ideal that often concealed deep personal pain. Carroll was a true pioneer, the first black woman to win a Tony Award and the first to lead a TV series in a non-stereotypical role with Julia. She was the epitome of glamour and strength. However, the price of being a trailblazer was steep. Her personal life was a turbulent storm of 4 failed marriages and a string of complex relationships, including a painful 9-year affair with Sidney Poitier, that left her emotionally scarred. She endured the tragic death of her third husband in a car accident just 2 years after their wedding, a loss that created a void no amount of applause could fill. As she aged, the battles moved from the heart to the body. In 1997, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, a fight she waged privately and fiercely for over 2 decades. In her final years, the formidable strength she showed the world began to wane under the weight of dementia and declining health. The woman who had always been in control was forced to surrender to the frailty of the human condition. The final curtain fell on this icon of elegance on October 4, 2019. Diane Carroll passed away at her home in West Hollywood at the age of 84. While she left behind a substantial fortune, her true story is a poignant reminder of the isolation that can exist at the summit of success and the hidden emotional tolls paid by those we consider invincible. Lou Myers as Vernon Gaines. Lou Myers burst into the hearts of viewers as Vernon Gaines, the grumpy yet lovable owner of the pit. With his silver hair, distinctive booming voice, and a face that could express 1,000 grievances before breaking into a warm smile, Myers created a character that was the culinary and comedic grandfather of Hillman College. Joining the show at 53, he became an essential part of the fabric of a different world, representing the blue-collar wisdom and tough love that grounded the students' lofty dreams. In reality, Lou Myers was a man of deep artistic integrity, a veteran of the stage who breathed life into the complex plays of August Wilson, yet the warmth of Mr. Gaines' kitchen was a stark contrast to the cold reality of Myers' financial struggles. Despite his fame and critical acclaim, the life of a character actor did not bring him security. He faced periods of extreme poverty, at times teetering on the brink of homelessness. His devotion to art often came at the expense of personal stability. His marriage crumbled, and he endured a painful decades-long estrangement from his only son. The final chapter of his life was a testament to the harshness of the American healthcare system and the fragility of aging alone. Ravaged by diabetes, his body began to fail him. A stroke cruelly robbed him of his most powerful instrument, his voice, silencing the boom that had commanded so many scenes. He spent his last days dependent on medical care, far removed from the laughter of the pit. On February 19, 2013, the lights went out for Lou Myers. He died at Charleston Medical Center at the age of 77. He passed away without his wife or son by his side, with an estate valued at less than $500. It was a tragic, quiet end for a man who had brought so much noise and joy to the world. Thalmus Rasulala as Dean Harris. In the inaugural season of A Different World, Thalmus Rasulala set the tone as Dean Harris. At 53, his imposing physical presence and deep voice established the seriousness of the academic environment. Though his tenure on the show was short, his impact as the authoritative figurehead was undeniable. Born Jack Crowder, Thalmus was a star forged in the fires of the blaxploitation era, known for iconic roles in Blackula and Cool Breeze, and playing the elder Kunta Kinte in Roots. He was a symbol of strength and resistance on screen, but behind the tough exterior, Thalmus was fighting a losing battle with his own demons. Alcoholism slowly eroded his life, costing him his health, his first marriage, and his relationship with his children. As the blaxploitation craze faded, so did his career. The phone stopped ringing, and the man who was once a symbol of power found himself forgotten. He suffered a massive stroke in 1998 that left him incapacitated, forcing him into a nursing home in New Mexico, far away from the glitz of Hollywood and the family he had become estranged from. It was a lonely, heartbreaking existence for a man who had once commanded the screen. The end came suddenly and too soon. On October 9, 1991, shortly after filming a small role, Thalmus Rasulala died of a heart attack at the age of only 51. Note: the source text has a discrepancy with dates citing a stroke in 1998, but death in 1991. Following the narrative instruction to prioritize the provided texts. Timeline of death. He passed away, leaving a legacy of powerful performances, but a life cut tragically short by the struggles that often plague those who rise too fast and fall too hard. Ron O'Neal as Mercer Gilbert. Ron O'Neal stepped into the role of Mercer Gilbert Whitley's wealthy and imposing father, bringing a sense of gravitas and complexity to the screen. At 51, his portrayal of a successful protective father offered a counter-narrative to the prevailing stereotypes of black fatherhood. However, for O'Neal, this role was a rare bright spot in a career that had been haunted by his greatest success. In 1972, O'Neal became an instant icon as Priest in Superfly. It was a role that defined cool, but it became a golden cage Hollywood in its myopia, refused to see him as anything other than a street hustler or a gangster. The industry that celebrated his charisma simultaneously stifled his range, typecasting him in a way that deeply wounded his artistic soul. Beneath the surface of the handsome leading man lay a deep sadness. His personal life suffered. As his career stagnated, 2 marriages ended in divorce, he had no children, and he battled bouts of depression born from unfulfilled potential and the bitterness of being boxed in. He became a vocal critic of the industry, which only served to isolate him further. In his later years, he lived reclusively, taking small roles to survive. A shadow of the superstar he once was. The final blow came in the form of pancreatic cancer, a swift and merciless disease. Fate delivered a final ironic twist on the day of his passing. On January 14, 2004, Ron O'Neal died in Los Angeles at the age of 66. It was the exact same day that Superfly was re-released on DVD, celebrating the role that had both made and unmade him. He died with almost no money to his name, leaving no lineage behind, a tragic figure who gave the world an icon but lost himself in the process. Roscoe Lee Brown as Dr. Barnabas Foster. Roscoe Lee Brown brought an air of supreme intellect and dignity to Hillman College as Dr. Barnabas Foster. At 66, his baritone voice, often described as sounding like mink fur, and his command of language intimidated and inspired the students. In equal measure, he represented the pinnacle of black academia, a man of letters who demanded excellence. The man behind the professor was even more impressive. Roscoe Lee Brown was a true Renaissance man, a poet, a former track star, and a classically trained actor. However, his journey was defined by a feeling of displacement. He was often told he was too dark for some roles, yet his polished, mid-Atlantic diction was deemed too white for others. He existed in a liminal space, too refined for the stereotypes Hollywood wanted to peddle, and too black for the establishment to fully embrace. Brown led a life of solitude. He never married, never had children, and kept his private life fiercely guarded. He found his companionship in literature and the theater, dedicating himself to the spoken word. But the voice that had been his passport through life, the voice that had resonated from Shakespeare in the Park to The Cosby Show, was eventually silenced by stomach cancer. The disease stripped him of his strength and his ability to project that magnificent sound. On April 11, 2007, the class was dismissed for the final time. Roscoe Lee Brown passed away at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles at the age of 84. While he left behind a modest fortune, his true legacy was the dignity he fought for and maintained in an industry that often tried to strip it away. Art Evans as Mr. Johnson. Art Evans appeared briefly but memorably as Mr. Johnson, the kind and humble father of Ron Johnson. At 48, he perfectly encapsulated the spirit of the quiet, hard-working father figure, a man of few words but deep love. This role was emblematic of Evans' career. He was the consummate character actor. The face you knew from Die Hard 2 or A Soldier Story, even if you didn't know his name. Evans was a musician and a storyteller, a man who built a 50-year career on reliability and skill. He was never the flashy star, but the solid ground upon which scenes were built. Yet the life of a working actor is often a lonely one, following a failed marriage and estrangement from his children. Evans lived a solitary life. He was a man who gave his energy to the camera, leaving little for his own home. In his final years, he battled diabetes, a disease that slowly chipped away at his vitality. He lived in a small apartment far from the luxury one might expect, dependent on doctors and fading from the public consciousness. There were no headlines, no fanfares. On December 21st, 2024, Art Evans passed away from complications of diabetes. He was 82 years old. His death went largely unnoticed by the major press, a silent ending for a man who had been a silent pillar of black cinema. His estate was modest, but his contribution to the tapestry of film was invaluable. Richard Roundtree as Clinton Reese. When Richard Roundtree appeared as Clinton Reese, a mentor figure offering sage advice, he brought with him the weight of cinema history. At 47, he didn't need to do much to command respect. He was, after all, the man who had been Shaft as Clinton Reese. He showed a softer, more mature side, distinct from the leather-clad action hero of his youth. Roundtree was the first black action hero, a cultural revolutionary who changed how black men were perceived on screen. But the shadow of John Shaft was long and inescapable. While it gave him a career, it also trapped him in a box of hypermasculinity that was hard to break. His real-life battle, however, was one that challenged that very concept of masculinity. In 1993, he was diagnosed with male breast cancer, a disease so rare and stigmatized that many men suffered in silence. Roundtree, however, chose to fight openly. He underwent a double mastectomy and chemotherapy, becoming a quiet advocate and redefining what it meant to be a strong man. He continued to work tirelessly, appearing in hit shows and films well into his later years, always bringing that signature cool. But the cancer eventually returned, this time attacking his pancreas. On October 24, 2023, the original Bad Mother, Shut Your Mouth, was silenced. Richard Roundtree died at his home in Los Angeles at the age of 81. He left behind a legacy that transcended acting. He was a symbol of pride, a survivor, and a man who taught the world that true strength lies in vulnerability. Robert Guillaume as Dean Winston. Robert Guillaume joined a different world in its 5th season as Dean Winston, bringing a warmth and fatherly wisdom that the show needed during a time of transition. At 64, Guillaume was already television royalty, known to the world as Benson. His role as Dean Winston was small, but it was delivered with the effortless grace of a master craftsman. Guillaume's life was a testament to resilience. Born into poverty and abandoned by his mother, he fought his way up from the streets of St. Louis to the heights of Broadway and Hollywood. He broke racial barriers, winning Emmys and voicing the wise Rafiki in The Lion King. But his smile hid a river of tears. He buried a son who died of AIDS in 1990, a grief that he carried in silence. Then, in 1999, his own body betrayed him. He suffered a massive stroke on the set of Sports Night. The stroke should have ended his career. Instead, Guillaume relearned how to walk and talk, returning to the screen with a vulnerability that only added to his greatness. He continued to work, refusing to let his physical limitations define him. However, even the strongest fighters must eventually rest. On October 24, 2017, Robert Guillaume passed away at his home in Los Angeles from complications of prostate cancer. He was 89 years old. He left the world not just as a beloved actor, but as a man who had stared down adversity time and time again and always found a way to smile back. Rosalind Cash as Dean Hughes. Rosalind Cash arrived at Hillman as Dean Hughes, a character who embodied authority and grace. At 51, she portrayed the stern headmaster with a sharp eye and an even sharper wit, representing the backbone of the institution. Her performance was a masterclass in portraying the strong, educated black woman who refuses to suffer fools. Off-screen, Rosalind Cash was a woman of mystery and fierce independence. She was a legend of 1970s cinema, starring in The Omega Man and refusing to play stereotypical roles of maids or victims. Yet, despite her undeniable presence and talent, she was often overlooked for leading lady status, relegated to being the most powerful person in the background. Her private life was a fortress. She never married and had no children, and she refused to let the public into her inner world. She was described as a lone wolf, a woman who found solace in her own company and her art. When cancer struck, she handled it with the same steely resolve she applied to her career. She told almost no one, refusing pity or charity. She continued to work, hiding her pain behind the professionalism that had defined her life. On October 31st, 1995, the silence became permanent. Rosalind Cash passed away in Los Angeles, just 2 months shy of her 57th birthday. There was no massive funeral, no public spectacle. She died as she had lived, on her own terms, keeping her mystery intact until the very end.